What would happen if employees with disabilities and long-term conditions expected great experiences at work? Hi everyone, I'm Sally Owen, Co-Managing Director at PurpleSpace, the world's only networking and professional development hub for disability employee resource group and network leaders, champions and allies. I know from my own personal experience, and at PurpleSpace, we hear firsthand how hard it is for many of us to share information and experiences of disability, neurodivergence and/or mental health with our colleagues. We are often worried that by sharing our story, others may perceive of us differently and our worth might be diminished. We worry that people might treat us differently or that it will have an impact on our future and our future career. We also know that it can get easier to share information over time, especially when we know it can make it easier for us to be productive, effective and authentic at work. That's why PurpleSpace is on a mission to develop the inner confidence of every disabled employee so that we all feel able to share aspects of our story and to request the adjustments or accommodations we need to thrive. And it's why we've designed this course, to support employees with disabilities, long-term conditions, mental health conditions and neurodivergence to build their inner confidence and personal resilience. During the course, we will help you to understand what confidence is to people with disabilities and how you can nurture the right mindset to enter purposeful conversations with your colleagues. Understand the 6 fundamentals when initiating a confident conversation. Understand the 6 hurdles to having confident conversations and the things you can do to avoid them. We will also hear from extraordinary leaders with disabilities from across the PurpleSpace community about how they have developed their inner disability confidence. This is a starting point for you to reflect on how you might build inner confidence and build confident conversations into your everyday experiences. This course is not about fixing people with disabilities. PurpleSpace firmly believe in the social model of disability. It's not about teaching disabled people how to pretend to be normal. No one should ever feel pressurised into sharing their experience of disability or long-term condition unless they want to. And it's often in our interest to avoid oversharing medical or other details with our colleagues. And it's not about putting the onus on the disabled individual. We know that most of the barriers we experience are external. You know the ones. Inaccessible built and digital environments, inadequate policy and process or other people's attitudes and low expectations. They're the barriers that our global community of disability, ERG and network leaders are working with their communities and their companies to identify and dismantle. Even in the most enlightened organisations though, progress can be slow and the impact isn't always felt by individuals quickly or consistently. This means there is benefit in disabled employees having the skill to advocate for themselves with confidence and without apology. This course will provide support in building confidence from the inside out. We believe that by helping others get a better appreciation of our positive lived experience, we create the circumstances where we build better working relationships with our colleagues. Through our research, we've spoken to many thousands of disabled people, and the best definition of confidence we've found is a strong expectation of a positive outcome. Confidence is more than just a feeling we have. It's not a personality trait that you either have or don't have. Confidence is a personal assessment of a situation that activates our motivation to do something successfully. So if confidence is a strong expectation of a positive and satisfactory outcome, then how can we build this expectation into our everyday work conversations? So what can we do to preserve and protect our brand as high-performing employees? And how can we take that a step further and enhance our brand via confident conversations? Over the rest of the course, we will explore the fundamentals and the hurdles of building inner confidence. As we build our universal definition of confidence as a strong expectation of a positive outcome, we identified there are 6 fundamentals in building inner confidence. Fundamental 1. We need to make sense of and assimilate new parts of our identity. This is especially relevant for those of us who acquire a disability during our working lives. This really resonates with me. It took me some time to be able to confidently share my story of disability. We need to be kind to ourselves. We need to be patient with ourselves, as making sense of a disability or long-term condition can take time. There may be a period of adjustment, and we might have to identify and adopt new strategies to assimilate this aspect of our identity. We might need to take our time to work through any feelings of loss or uncertainty. Once we have found ways to incorporate both the challenge and the positive aspects of our experience into our everyday conversation, the more likely it is we can convey a balanced narrative about our lived experience with colleagues. Let's listen to Capita's Damien Riley reflect on assimilating a new identity after a life-changing accident.
I went from this hugely capable athlete to somebody that was needing help to feed, clothe, wash, everything else in the early days of my injury. So it's a profound change. And I think you can't rush that. You need time to assimilate it. But I think unless you've assimilated the sense of what does this mean for me and my identity, it's actually quite difficult to get other people into a place where you can expect them to assimilate it.
Let's hear another example, this time from MSD's Jean Coe, who shares her experience of making sense of a new diagnosis.
When I think of this, my head goes in many different directions. Some people develop disabilities later in life, while others are born with a disability. But I'm thinking also, for example, if one is born in a culture where disability is highly stigmatized, especially physical disabilities and mental health issues, but understanding one's intrinsic worth as a human being later in life are some scenarios of assimilating new parts of our identity. So in my case, having only been diagnosed about 4 years ago as a neurodivergent, I'm still making sense of me. I'm on a continuous learning journey with myself and the world around me. The hardest part for me was unlearning what was and embracing what is. And identity is hard. There are aspects of it that are easy or easier, but the parts of me I felt were wrong or shameful or even called abnormal growing up, those took a bit of time to reconcile and bring into the fold with a lot of compassion. I was rewatching Good Will Hunting with my partner a couple of nights ago, and there was this particular scene where Robin Williams, who was playing Matt Damon's Will Hunting character's therapist in the movie, kept repeating to him, "It's not your fault," over and over, until Will broke down and cried. And that really struck me hard because healing is a journey, and some wounds leave deep scars, and you've got to truly make peace with that scar and be okay with it being there. And some days you might feel sadness looking at that scar, and some days gratitude, and it's okay.
Fundamental 2. Sometimes we have to understand that not all our colleagues may understand the impact of our disability or health condition. Some colleagues who haven't experienced disability or long-term conditions might underestimate us. They may underestimate our skill set, our work experience, our ambition, or even the creative ways that we found to get things done. We must find techniques that work for us to address this when it happens, but we also need to free ourselves from thinking that we can and should correct everyone's bias. Whatever we do, we must not absorb other people's lack of expectation. And don't let yourself live there. That's other people's stuff to deal with. We have to learn to trust that the next exchange can be different. So let's take this practical example for the next fundamental. Let's hear from NatWest Group's Suzanne Rodway on how she handles people's negative assumptions.
The need to help educate people around that. And as I say, a very senior person saying to me, "Oh, you're ambitious in spite of," and having to in that moment say to them, "Do you realise what you just said?" And watch them go, "Oh yeah," and help them learn that that's not an okay assumption to make. You wouldn't make that assumption because I'm a woman, So why would you make it because I'm in a wheelchair? There's nothing that suggests I wouldn't be ambitious.
I can't help but ask a supplementary to that, Suzanne. Do you always call that out? Or are there moments sometimes you just let it go because life's too short?
There are moments I let it go. What I will normally do is rant to someone afterwards, and sometimes they'll go, yeah, you can't let that go. I'll be like, oh, I know. And it's not for me, it's for the people that come behind me. And I take that exceptionally seriously.
Let's hear another example, this time from Nestlé's Katia Regina, who shares her experience of navigating low expectations from often well-meaning colleagues.
After my trauma, I focused on getting stronger both mentally and physically. When I felt ready, I went back to work. Many people supported me during this time, and I'm very thankful for that. However, I also faced some challenges. Some people had the perspective that because of my disability, I should work from home and not go to the office. I even received ideas about considering early retirement so I could focus on my health. I believe those who shared this view had good intentions and really wanted to support me. But if I had not built my confidence, these comments could have made me feel like giving up. I'm so glad I didn't give up. Work has been an important part of my healing. So, not every day is easy. Sometimes I need more rest because of spasms, pressure sources, and urinary infections, which are common for people with paraplegia. But my belief that I'm still capable helps me recover quickly. Soon, I'm back at work, active and ready to face new challenges. Dealing with these hurdles has shown me that not every day will be easy, and it's important to be prepared for setbacks. Confidence comes from knowing there will be challenges and difficulties. With this in mind, I stay focused on my path and ready to move forward.
Fundamental 3. Take a proactive role in understanding the adjustment or accommodation that you need. No one person with the same condition will have the same lived experience or need the same adjustment or accommodation. Part of being confident is knowing what to ask for and how to ask for it. If you need an adjustment or accommodation to work more effectively, do some research. Talk to others who have been through the process and look at what your organisation has already done. Finding the right solution can take time, and employers or our manager often need our help with what works best for us. Take responsibility for looking into what works for you. It will save you time in the long run. For a practical example of this fundamental, let's hear from Fastmarket's Toby Burton about how he has learned to take ownership of his adjustments at work.
One thing that I learned fairly early on is that relying on other people was not going to be the way for me. I needed to take control. I needed to be in control of things.
How do you mean, Toby? Do you mean interpreters, or do you mean line managers or direct reports? When you say not relying, who's it you mean?
I think not relying on companies to know how to work things out for me. Let me give you an example that comes to mind. So there was an example where I was told there was a hugely important meeting next week, a steering committee where decisions had to be made on this day. There were lots of people who were going to be in the room at the same time. And, I was ambitious. I wanted to be at the table with everybody else. At no point did I say, oh, I'm not sure that's going to be possible for me. So I said, absolutely, I will be there. And then I needed to find interpreters. I didn't have an interpreter book for that day, and I looked far and wide. And on that particular day, I couldn't find an interpreter. The day before, the evening before, I searched far and wide. Really close to the date, I found a couple of interpreters. I booked them, I confirmed them, I sent them the hours, I told them the meeting was really important, I briefed them, I prepped them, I sent them documentation, I walked them through it, I explained what I wanted to achieve from the meeting, I made sure they both knew exactly what the meeting was all about and how important it was. The night before the meeting happened, one of the organisers sent out an email saying, "Oh, actually, someone's ill. We'll do the meeting another time." And I thought, it impacted my confidence so much. I had put so much effort, blood, sweat and tears into searching, finding interpreters, and then the meeting was just moved, just like that. And I realised that, I couldn't blame them for doing that, because I knew how much work I had put into that. And I think what I learned from that was that I spoke to people about that and said, if it's a really important meeting, that's great, and I absolutely want to be there. I will make sure I find the absolute best interpreters. I will find when they're available and I will book them. And then you will know that I have got the interpreters booked. If they're important meetings, I'm here, I'm ready to come. I want really good interpreters. So we align everything, make sure the interpreters are booked. And then I leave it to the organisers to brief the interpreters. And if they move the meeting, then they would rearrange the interpreters. That no longer becomes, my sweat that goes into that and my effort, because actually it's their responsibility to find those interpreters and have them available at the right time. So I feel like I just have been able to take much more control of that sort of organisation of things.
Let's hear another example, this time from Tesco's Russell Price, who shares his approach to managing his disability and adjustments.
I didn't talk about it for a couple of years because I was worried that it would impact my career. I felt a bit of a fraud. I didn't feel like I had a disability because I went from one day not having one to the next day being at work faced with this condition. And I do empathise with management, with managers that don't understand disability, because if you haven't had a lived condition and you've not experienced it with family or friends, it's difficult to understand and empathise exactly how it can affect you. In my condition, you have better days than others. There are some times when you feel well and fit to do your job, and sometimes you have to make decisions to work remotely. There needs to be some empathy with flexible working and tools to help you do your job. I've got good workplace adjustments in place. Sometimes I need them, sometimes I don't, and sometimes I need to respond on the day.
Let's move on to Fundamental 4. It can be useful to get comfortable in sharing some of our story. This is the one it took me a long time to master. Sharing something of our personal story can often lead the way to a more informed and supportive relationship with our colleagues and our managers. If they don't know what we need to work well, they won't know how they can help. By thinking about our story in advance, we can choose how much information we share. If you have an invisible disability, you're certainly going to need to learn to share your story with your colleagues. By thinking about our story in advance, we can choose how much information we share. For example, we don't have to share private medical information with work colleagues to be able to tell some of our story, and we'll want to avoid oversharing. Storytelling takes practice, and we should start by thinking about the end result. What do you want people to think, to feel, and to do as a result of hearing your story? For a practical example of this fundamental, let's now hear from Sarah Weller, Non-Executive Director of BT Group plc and Virgin Money Group and Chair of the Money and Pension Service, on how she approaches telling her story.
I've gone from a position where I was more or less able to walk with one stick to a position where I'm now more or less a wheelchair user full time. And I have spent a lot of that time trying to talk to myself about how I can position with myself, how I feel about that journey, and then using it to articulate it to other people. When I started that, I was a bit clumsy about it. I wasn't quite sure how much to share, how much not to share, which bits were going to engage with people and which bits were not. So if I explain my story, people will be very supportive. They'll say good things and they'll say, it's amazing that you continue to contribute. It's really valuable to have you here. It doesn't matter that you can't walk and all that sort of stuff. It's all said with a good tone, and actually, I take it in good heart because I know where they're coming from. But equally, because I've managed to dispel any worry they might have had about my condition and how I feel about it, I've given them an indication of how they can help me, so they now feel empowered. Actually, they walk away positive too, and it's learning how to have the conversation in a way that you both come away feeling good about it.
Let's now hear from EY's Mike Zettmeyer on the approach he takes when he's communicating with his colleagues.
It's fascinating using artificial intelligence now.
Yeah.
The I, as somebody who's neurodiverse, maybe not great in representing ideas and concepts in writing, AI is a complete step change. And that, I think, will have a big impact for people like me going forward, particularly younger people who that will become first nature. I'm very open, and I will sit on a call and say, guys, I'm going to need some help. I can't represent this information in a written form because that's not my skill set. Who can help me?
Fundamental 5. Others may not get it right when it comes to our personal language preferences or offering help. Here at PurpleSpace, we work with organisations that use employee with disability, disabled employee, or person with determination. We will all have personal preferences on this, and it's important to remember that others rarely ever intend to offend. When someone says something based on their lack of understanding, or when they haven't had time to stop and think before they speak or act, we have choices. We can challenge them, we can try to help them develop their understanding, or we can ignore it and move on. Most of us will use a mixture of these techniques. That is not to say we must accept things that are wrong or hurtful. Developing the skill to suggest people use alternative terms or descriptions when they talk about us or other disabled people can be a good idea. For a practical example of this fundamental, let's hear from former CEO of Bravissimo, Leanne Carhill.
It's the little things or the little sayings that people say sometimes where they then feel a little bit awkward. Do you want a hand with that? It's but using those opportunities not as awkward moments, but actually using them to say that's my in. So how do I, then use a bit of humour, then tell a story, and suddenly you're really building a relationship.
Let's hear another example. This time from Zain Group's Wad Al-Azmi, who shares how she handles well-intentioned but unsolicited offers of help.
When we talk about help, we always say that it's always preferable that people ask us before they help us. But let me tell you an example. I used to go to the basement where it's very crowded, a lot of tables, randomly, a lot of chairs, a lot of different things, and many people. And people would immediately come to me because they don't want me to fall down or something bad happens to me. So they would immediately take my cane, help me. And this is something that I really, really appreciate. But it makes me wonder, if someone helps me today, then what about tomorrow? Who's gonna help me? That's why, in order for someone to be independent, they need to work on it. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work. And for me, whenever I said no, it's not because I didn't want them to help me. It's because I wanted to be more independent, and I wanted, okay, if this time doesn't work, there is another time. If I lost it all, there is another chance for me.
Fundamental 6. Network and connect with others who have built their confidence. Finding others who have taken steps to build their confidence at work while managing their disability can be one of the most powerful things you can do. By connecting with others, we can often learn about the types of workplace adjustments or accommodations that exist, or share tips with each other about having confident conversations with managers and colleagues. Make a conscious choice to seek out the ideas and lived experience of other employees with disabilities. And if your organisation has one, join its disability employee resource group or network. Let's hear a practical example in relation to this fundamental. Here's Novartis's Pavan Kumar Basilamar on how he has built his confidence by networking with other employees with disabilities and by connecting with ideas from writers and other thinkers.
This is about one of our own colleague who is working as who is in a people and organization function, who is a head who has a disability and is on wheelchair. So her resilience, commitment to do something was very encouraging and motivated most of the capable associates. That's how I got inspired and motivated to think positively and to work on my disability or kind of a thinking of disability over there. We, as a capable ERG team, came up with a listening group to exchange opinions, issues at work, also to share stories. Here in this listening group, there is no judgment, and everyone can share their own concerns or their own views, uh, their own views on disabilities or what they think about the work culture, workspace in our organization. During the conversation, we used to talk how inclusive the organization is and what matters most. By encouraging fellow people to share their views, opinions openly, where group members will listen without any judgment. The external wisdom helped me a lot to fight back and to be mentally strong. Books like Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Franklin was a good book which hit me hard, and then was reading on those and thinking on those lines of the book and the life of Viktor Franklin when he was serving the when he was serving the punishment in the concentration camp. Second one, the Morris E. Goodman is a story. He's a real Morris E. Goodman story is a story which really blown and gave motivation to think positive possibilities and courage in my downtime. He's also called as the Miracle Man. Morris Goodman met with an accident, and he joined in the hospital and had multiple fractures and multiple surgeries over there. But his only motivation is to his motivation of thinking positive as well as possibilities, where he was just blinking. He's communicating only just blinking with his eyes. So these are the possibilities which really help me a lot. The possibility of how to what to work, what to concentrate rather than why it happened to me or why I am like this in this particular situation. So that's the reason I say that the external wisdom is really helped a lot to me to be strong both in personal level as well as at professional life as well. The last one, the last story which really helped me and to think of more is the famous presenter, TV anchor, Trevor Noah, who actually he's also dragged to riches. So he also faced a lot of problems with his families, and but the resilience, the fighting back mentality, the fighting back things really helped me out. And the one word still I remember from his story is Sankwela. Sankwela is nothing but don't underestimate me, don't undermine me, or just try me. There are different phrases to this particular word, but these are the three words which hit me a lot. So that's the reason I would like to say that struggles shape strength, mindset fuels recovery, and every moment of life is precious. So live life.
Let's hear another example, this time from Oracle's Rachel Magario, discussing why she has found networking so powerful.
So for me, I think the key for growth and learning in my career is the power of networking. It is important regardless of any disability or abilities, but I believe that networking is key for growth. I come from the perspective that it's very important to know your craft and have that knowledge, but after that, networking is one of the most important things, because you have to create relationships if you want to advance in any career, I believe. And in my case, since I'm totally blind and have ADHD, I often need favors or help to unblock myself from many accessibility, technical accessibility barriers. And I learned early on that I had to reach out and be able to ask. And by doing that, I was able to develop better networking, right? One is the humbleness to know that we all need help at any given time, regardless of abilities. And then be able to reach out and ask for perhaps a hand. Also, to be able to get to know people, because often asking help for somebody that you don't know is very different than asking to be unblocked by somebody that you do know. So I am very proactive about setting up coffee chats, I think, or tea chats, like I like to say, because I'm not a coffee person. So I like to get together with people virtually or in person and get to know them, get to know about them and who they are and what they enjoy, and find those things we have in common. And that usually lead to projects together and leads to many times even friendships. It leads to a lot of collaboration. And then you don't have to ask for help because now you are working with people you enjoy. So for me, networking is key. Being able to connect people with each other makes you very valuable.
We also need to have an understanding of the 6 hurdles we might encounter on the journey to building our confidence. Hurdle 1, getting stuck in self-limiting beliefs. This one really resonates with me. Sometimes we limit ourselves. We might be focused on a conversation or an experience that we had years ago that didn't go well, and even now it still feels raw. Or we might think that we can't get something or ask for something, so we don't try, we don't ask. It's one thing to have a plan B, but we shouldn't assume that every experience will have a negative outcome. For a practical example of this hurdle, let's now hear from Nathan Warren from Sanctuary Group on how he approaches his self-limiting beliefs.
I got a D for disability. I didn't get an A, I didn't get a B, I certainly didn't get a C. At best, I got a D. And what I mean is, I was embarrassed about what was happening to me because I was a roughy, toughy professional. I was ambitious, wrongly, for myself. And I thought that this was going to end everything for me. I thought that by 2015, my working career would be over. I would no longer be able to provide the support to others that I thrive off. And what actually happened is that slowly I lost strength in my legs. Slowly, the circulation in my feet got worse. And I had to modify my life, but I didn't do it positively. I did it negatively. So I stopped using trains because I couldn't get on a train. I started to shrink my world and I started to lose confidence. So that inner confidence, despite the fact that my outer confidence was seemingly strong, my inner confidence was not. I tried to manage everything so acutely in terms of where I would be, where I would get there. It became suffocating. So I would be thinking about a trip to London, like we are today, that's been relatively painless for me. Today, in 2012, I would have gone into hyperdrive, thinking about how I can do that. I didn't need a blue badge because I'm not disabled, so therefore you don't get the support. I didn't talk to my colleagues about it. We had no disability network. I had no lived experience of friends who had gone through this.
Nathan, you're not alone. It's a very common experience, I think, particularly with people with progressive diseases that don't have an end point as such. You know, that uncertainty is very real. You're now a very different creature, dare I say it. You are confident, you live comfortably in your skin. You do a huge amount to support your own colleagues at Sanctuary Group. What changed? What were the key moments that you started to build that inner confidence? Did it come from you? Did it come from others? Was it a mixture?
I think it was definitely a mixture. And if I had a lesson for other people, it would be share. Just share. Give your data to your organisation.
Why do you say that?
Because I didn't. We had a box at Sanctuary to tick if you had a disability. Now, I couldn't tick that box. And that meant that my organisation couldn't help me. And my naivety at this, and I'm a group director, so I'm on the main executive committee at this point. I'm seen as a senior leader in the organisation, but I can't tick a box. And that meant that people couldn't help me. It meant that I didn't get the support that I clearly needed. It was awful. I was in the absolute worst place. So slowly I moved on to crutches. Then I would fall over. And then I couldn't stand up on my own. So I would find myself lying in a car park, unable to move. at that point, I don't know whether when it was lying on the floor, I just made the decision that I needed to take ownership of this and I needed to come out. I spoke to LGBTQ friends about the moments they'd had where they told people their story. And for me, that was what I did. I just started to be a bit more open.
What did it do for yourself? What were the positive impacts of you not masking anymore?
Oh, I ticked the box. I got a blue badge. Parking in car parking spaces, which are 100 yards away from a supermarket, is incredibly painful when you can't walk, but your mind's telling you that you're not disabled. It all changed. Immediately, all the support of my organisation, which is fantastic, was wrapped around me. Suddenly, people were talking to me about the disability that they all knew about, but I was uncomfortable to talk about. It is a wonderful, wonderful feeling when that weight lifts off your shoulders. And the organisations that many of the people who use PurpleSpace and many of the Sanctuary employees have around them is able to do what it does, provides the support that now I'm a planes, trains and automobiles, not planes, less planes. But nothing restricts me. I have a great wheelchair. I've got colleagues, friends, family, and I can be the person that I was in 2008 again. No, it's made me better.
Let's hear another example, this time from Sanofi's Leon Ochai, who shares how he has learned to overcome self-limiting beliefs.
What you can see on the screen right now, which is a chest and above a portrait picture of myself. But in reality, actually, I am sitting on a wheelchair and I will need wheelchair to go anywhere. So this happened when I broke my neck and had a spinal cord injury. I knew that there are many things that I cannot do. It was my interviewer, general manager of the country, who basically said that, Leon, enough. You don't have to talk about what you cannot do. Tell me about what you can do, because I will be employing you for what you can do. That is a very strong word that stays in my mind, because when you have trouble, when you have barriers, when you have challenges, you tend to keep things in yourself. You tend to forget that what you can do, and then you always talk about self-limiting factors. I did not think about I could travel. I did not think about I could go on meetings with external stakeholders. I thought that I will have more troubles going here and there, even within the company offices. But it was with his reminder to me that I realized that there are more that I can do, and then I should not be limiting myself, and then to challenge more rather than not to challenge.
Hurdle 2. On the flip side of this, we also have to keep in mind that even if the first conversation is successful, we can't assume that all future conversations will go as well. Just as we shouldn't assume that all conversations will go badly, we also have to avoid developing a false sense of security if one conversation goes well. We might move roles or organisations or experience culture change, which means we still have to be prepared for different experiences. For a practical illustration of this hurdle, let's now hear from Serco's Annette Moody on how she approaches every new interaction.
I've realised that people are kind. Yeah. So most people want to help. One of my mantras at work has always been assume positive intent. So something that I got, a message I took away from a training course really early in my career, that you do need to assume positive intent. And so I think I realised that most people generate from a kind place. They don't always get it right. And so I think the challenge is to work with people's kindness and get what you want from it. But I think that's the biggest thing that I've learned, is that most people do genuinely want to help.
Yeah.
Even though it doesn't always feel like it.
Yeah, but wise advice. Sometimes we can get in a pickle about how other people may perceive us, for example. What about those moments where you've had to proactively ask for an adjustment or something to be done differently around you? How have you approached that? I mean, you're a senior business leader, so we may be forgiven for thinking perhaps it's easier for you, but it won't always be easy. How do you approach an ask?
As straightforwardly as possible. I think if in any situation, if you try to dress up what you need with kind of over explaining, then it just gets uneasy for everybody. So I think I just try and do it as naturally as possible. So could you move the table, or could I have a different height table, or can you help me adjust it? I think the best thing with everybody is just to be dead straightforward. And I have been right from the very outset. I guess when you go back to the get me home, get me to work, that's been my approach right throughout.
Yeah.
Hurdle 3, not considering other people's perspectives. Building inner confidence requires us to take responsibility for our own actions. Even in the most extreme circumstances and challenging life events, we often have a choice about how we react and how we respond. Dwelling on our past experiences can often cause more damage to our prospects than any colleague or line manager can ever do. Being confident requires an enormous effort to expect good things in our lives as well as the challenges. It's often about nurturing the skill and aptitude to move on from past hurts. For a practical example of this hurdle, let's hear from Capita's Damian Riley on how he responds to difficult moments.
I still have bad days, like everybody has. And even the most positive people don't stop having bad days. But what you get good at, I think, is recognising the bad day for what it is and not extemporising from what is a bad day and making it feel like it's the biggest thing that you can't get past. So I think I'm probably pretty good at recognising when I'm having a down day and just containing it and just accepting it's a down day and moving on to the next day. And I think that helps because I think one of the reasons people have been so willing to support me and to sort of rally to my cause is people tend to be drawn to positive energy. And I hope that's something that's helped me in terms of the journey I've been on and how I've been able to work with others around it.
For a practical example of this hurdle, let's listen to a reflection from Fastmarket's Toby Burton.
One of the hurdles that I saw that I thought was particularly relevant and something that I would really hold quite closely in my mind was about, not blaming other people for the things that went wrong or the mistakes that were made or the lack of confidence. And it's so easy to do that and very tempting to, because life can be frustrating. It can be incredibly annoying to be a person with a disability or with deafness who is struggling their way through. And I remember when I was my younger self, I was 25, hugely ambitious, wanted a great job, wanted to be in that really professional working environment. And I was in a new product team, very innovative, creating new products all of the time. They were working on the Knorr stock cube. So it was a new product to market that was going to go out to supermarkets. I was really excited. It was a team that was hugely creative, full of a buzz of creativity. And I needed to create a business case for that newly innovated product. So I needed to work on a business case as to how we were going to release that product to market. So I'd worked with the team, and the only thing left to do was to present to the board for them to sign the business case off, and then the product would be released into the market. Everything else was in place. I was well prepared. I was really confident that everything was exactly where it should be. I booked interpreters. My favourite regular interpreters weren't available, so I found 2 interpreters I didn't know so well. I stood up at the front of the room full of confidence. I can do this. My presentation is amazing. I knew my business case inside out. I was hugely passionate about it. I stood up and I started to sign. And 5 minutes later, I looked around the room and there were furrowed brows. The board didn't look convinced. I looked at the interpreters and they were obviously struggling. They were struggling to voice over. They were veering off track. What they were saying wasn't really relevant to what I was saying. They were just struggling so much to understand what I was signing. And then, you know, my business case looked like a loser. I mean, it just didn't look good at all. And my confidence was impacted so terribly. I wished I could fall down a hole and not come back out again. And I thought, you know, I can't work in a place like this. There's barriers everywhere. It's such hard work. The interpreter did a terrible job. The board didn't understand me. And I could have blamed everybody. Everybody else in the room I could have blamed. I was so frustrated and I was so cross. I had failed. You know, I was so hard on myself. It was such a failure. I went home and I procrastinated. I thought about it and I thought about it. And then I thought about it and thought, why am I blaming everybody else? Why was I so reliant on everybody else in that room? This is something I need to take responsibility for myself. So the next day, I sent a message and said, I realised that didn't go well. Can we do it again? I said to the board, because I'm absolutely confident I have the business case exactly where I should be. I said, can I give you a date? So I'm going to check when my interpreters are available, interpreters who understand me, who work well with me, and we will book the meeting again. So the meeting was set up. I stood up at the front of the room and it was like music to their ears. It was a totally different story. It landed beautifully. The board were excited. They saw how attractive the project was and they said, yes, let's go. They knew it was going to be a success. And it was just such a different situation. And it changed my attitude so much. You know, I could have blamed the interpreters or I could have blamed the board, but there was really no point in doing so. I needed to take control of my own destiny. And I think that was a real learning that I took and really gave me confidence to take control of situations.
Oh, wow.
Hurdle 4. Assuming negative intent. Though it's good to plan for disappointment or possible resistance, we have to avoid answering the resistors before colleagues have said or done anything. Don't assume that something someone says is an attack on your integrity if asked to give a bit more detail. And try not to fall into the habit of apologising for who you are and for experiencing disability. Instead, nurture the skill to take pride in how you navigate life and work and lead with your strengths and passion for the work you do. For a practical example, let's hear how Michelle Irving, founder and director of Chronic Illness at Work, learnt to navigate conversations about her condition with colleagues.
I needed to work out how to have healthy professional boundaries, because in the early stages, I was like in the vulnerability and sort of, you know, explaining everything all on the table. And that was making me way more vulnerable. Nobody needed that level of information, but I was trying to tell them all the things I was doing to try and get well, to prove that I was trying to get well. And so I had to stop that behavior. It wasn't good for me. It wasn't good for work. What I needed to do was be very clear about capacity and that I was following medical advice. And so that is what I shifted my language to, is this is the medical advice and I'm following that advice and this is my capacity. And what that did was depersonalize it from me trying to have this relationship with everybody else about me to the actual appropriate relationship, which was, I really am following medical advice. And when they say take this treatment, I take the treatment. And when they say, no, that's too much, I follow that. And that served me so much better.
Hurdle 5. Not anticipating the inevitable setback. Confidence comes from a place of knowing there will be challenges, difficulties, mistakes, and some losses, as well as gains. We experience setbacks in life, so when we develop our confidence at work, we need to be realistic that there will be difficult moments from time to time. We need to think about having a backup plan to get what we need and think about ways we might prepare for and respond to setbacks and potential uncomfortable conversations. For a practical example of this hurdle, let's hear from former CEO of Bravissimo, Leanne Carhill, on how she handled some of the unforeseen challenges that came with her first ever job.
I've always worked. From the second I was 16, I wanted a part-time job. I wanted to save up and buy a car. So I went out and I got myself a job at the local McDonald's in the high street. So customer facing, actually a very practical and physical job. And I remember going, and I'd filled in the forms, and I went and I had my interview and spoke to the manager, and he just kind of paused and half-assed, I can't remember how he worded it, but he was essentially asking me if I thought I'd be able to do the job that I was applying for, given that it was working in kitchens, lots of equipment, very fast moving. And I actually hadn't thought about that, which seems incredible and a bit ridiculous, but that had not occurred to me, that there might be things that I actually might struggle with, because I'd always had this attitude of I might do things differently, but I'll always be able to do them. And it was quite an interesting experience, because I immediately said, of course I'll be able to do it. You know, that was my immediate response. But I did go home thinking, will I? And what happens if I can't? So I did start work, and, you know, right at the beginning, that time when you're just navigating being in a workplace, working for people, meeting new people. And in that kind of a job, you know, you're meeting the public all the time, and children, and actually that's quite an exposed position to be in. And then realizing that I've got to move really, really quickly, and I've got to just find different ways of doing things, whether it's working with this specialist kitchen equipment or carrying lots of drinks or not slowing everyone down. But I think that was quite formative, because just doing it, finding out, yes, there was a few scrapes and tough moments, but I did it and I was fine. And I worked there a couple of years before I started university. It just builds a little bit of, actually, that was quite hard, but I did it. And I got through that time and I enjoyed it.
Hurdle 6, being overconfident. Sometimes we need to stay on the right side of confidence. In building our mindsets, we must try not to become overconfident, as this might lead to us neglecting to do the basics in framing a conversation. It might prevent us from hearing the concerns of others or considering internal forces within our organisations. We need to keep in mind that it's not just enough to feel confident. We must do our homework to deliver on our goals. So whether that is a work project, a presentation, or entering a conversation with confidence. For a practical illustration of this hurdle, let's now listen to Nationwide Building Society's Andrew Hinstridge reflect on confidence.
I've told a story of privilege, coming from a position where I started life with confidence that actually probably got to a level that was unhealthy in my 20s, that I thought I was invincible. With age came a degree of reflection, a sort of moderation that we all experience, where you start to become a little bit more uncertain. But it all comes to a head one evening in August last year, where I went from, I'd sat working in the afternoon, you know, thinking that it was all getting ahead of the game and being nice and organised so that I would start the week on a positive note, and spent that night wondering about where my bank statements were and whether my wife would be able to find them in an organised way. And that reset progressed. The next evening I lay awake, I mean, completely, with absolutely no basis in fact, spent the evening, the second night in hospital, worrying about whether I would ever be able to go back to work as a consequence of this, because not being able to cope in a high stress environment is basically completely incompatible with my role. And then, you know, after a week, this is my first experience with healthcare. I've had the occasional, you know, was born, had the occasional broken bone as a child, and then in my 40s ended up in hospital and not far off in life support. And week 2, when it didn't start, my legs didn't start to heal, I started wondering, will I ever actually be able to walk again? And happily, that happened fairly quickly. I didn't need to dwell on that. But each step in that journey, confidence that I'd built over years by professional knowledge and experience that meant that I was basically confident in any environment, got reduced to nil. And I just had to remember that I could do things and that I shouldn't be, things had changed, but actually by recognizing what had changed and what I could do to positively impact the difficulties that were going to be in my way has helped me rebuild that.
Congratulations on completing this course. I hope you found this resource useful and that it will support your journey as you interact with colleagues and find your own techniques to help you have confident conversations at work. During our time together, you've learned that when we frame confidence as an expectation of a positive outcome, we liberate ourselves from thinking that confidence is something we either have or we don't have. You've learned that confidence is managing work interactions, is a mindset and a skill we can develop and we can improve over time. You have learned that whilst there are many hurdles to building confidence, from getting stuck in self-limiting beliefs to being overconfident, there are also fundamentals to building confidence, like making sense of a new identity, to networking with and learning from other disabled employees. If you want to continue your journey to inner confidence and dive deeper into the lessons we've explored in this resource, then you can visit the PurpleSpace website at purplespace.org. Here you'll find our Inner Confidence Toolkit, which includes our Confident Conversations guides, our podcast series featuring intimate conversations with guests, offering their own models for building confidence and sharing standout lessons which employees can apply at work.